Well, what if I tell them about Jesus and they just don't believe me? I can go ahead and tell you ahead of time that you're going to bump into people and encounter people that you tell about Jesus, and they're not going to believe you. You think about it. Most of the world thinks about God as a God who would say, look, I want you to sacrifice your son to me. And we worship a God who said, I love you so much, I'm going to sacrifice my son for you. It's kind of hard to believe that God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, that whoever believes in him would not perish. I got to tell you, I'm not surprised when people say, look, I just don't believe what you're telling me. But remember when these women were told by the angel, look, Jesus that you saw crucified, stabbed, spat on, thorns of crown, beaten, whipped, this same Jesus that you saw breathe his last, put in the tomb, he's not there, he's alive. And they're going, I'm not sure I believe that. I'm afraid if I go tell people that, they won't believe me. I got to tell you, I think people might just not believe us today. But here's the good news. Acts 1:8 says, you shall be my witnesses. The assignment that God gives us today is not that we have to be the convincers. We don't have to convince and we don't have to convict. Our job is to be the witness. You go to court, the judge says, take a seat, raise your right hand, swear to tell the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God. I do. What did you see, Mr. Brown? This is what I saw. The guy says, you're a liar. I'm going, well, I don't know about that. I'm just telling you, this is what I saw. My job is not to convince you. My job is just to say, this is what I saw. It's the lawyer's job to convince you. My job is just to be a witness. The pressure is off of me and you. We don't have to have the job of trying to convince somebody that what happened in the tomb really happened, that what happened on the cross really happened. Our job is just to tell them. And so the angel, I think, rightfully says, don't be afraid. Well, why be afraid? Because, well, what if they don't believe me? The second thing is, I think sometimes we might be afraid to tell people about the cross, to tell people about Jesus, because they might not like us. If we tell them about Jesus, maybe they won't like us. Well, again, I'm not going to sugarcoat that. I think we live in a society, when I grew up, childhood, 1955, 1965, just about everybody in my neighborhood went to church. Is that the way it is today? No, really, things have kind of changed. Being a Christian in 1955 was acceptable. It was common. Being a Christian today, especially if you're what we would call an evangelical Christian, you believe the Bible, you believe in Jesus Christ, that's not a popular thing. I think there'll be people who won't like you if you seem to be the kind of person that talks about Jesus. You'll seem odd for God, and they'll just don't know what to do with that. Well, in fact, remember, some of you might remember back in the early 70s, there was a book by a guy named Paul Powell. He was a priest, and he wrote a book called Why Am I Afraid to Tell You Who I Am? It's a great book. Why am I afraid to tell you who I am? His answer was, I'm afraid to tell you who I am because if I tell you, you might not like me, and that's all I've got. It's a pretty powerful answer. But the truth is, that's not all you've got. That's not all you've got. You and I have the presence of God. We have the love of Jesus. We have the power of the Holy Spirit. When Jesus was baptized, before he ever taught, before he ever did a sermon, when Jesus was baptized, the voice of God came out of heaven and says, this is my son in whom I'm well pleased. Surely there was somebody around going, pleased to what? He's been a carpenter. He's just now starting his ministry. And I go, yeah, but I love him. I want you to know that I think God looks at you and me the same way and says, you're my beloved child, and I'm pleased in you. Well, all my mess-ups, all my foul-ups, all my hang-ups, all the things I do wrong, yeah, but you're still my child and I love you. What if we had that view of God that, well, I'm afraid if I do something they won't like me, and that's all I've got. That's not all you've got. You've got a Father in heaven who loves you dearly. The third thing is, I think some people are afraid to share the cross because they might meet some resistance. this is what Jesus said. Remember the word I said to you, a servant's not greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they'll persecute you. Did Jesus ever meet resistance? Of course. If he met resistance, and when he was trying to tell people about the love of God, you think we're going to meet resistance? Of course. We're not going to sugarcoat that. Of course you're going to meet resistance. You're trying to take somebody out of the enemy's territory and help them to come to where they were created to belong in the family of God. There's going to be some resistance. I was a softball coach when my daughter played softball, and you had some girls there who had never played before. And it's okay. It doesn't matter. You've seen somebody who's never picked up a softball before throw it. You know how awkward, remember how awkward it is? And so you start them off, and there's little exercises you can do about how to go through the muscle memory. And if they couldn't throw a softball 2 feet, and you would think they have everything to learn, they still are going to resist learning. It's like they know better. You can't teach them anything. And there's some people that are just going to resist. Listen, that's just the way we're wired up. People are usually down on what they're not up on, right? And if they don't know about Jesus, if they're not up on Jesus, chances are they're going to be down on him. You're going to meet some resistance. But the angel said, don't be afraid. Now, I want to give you 2 examples of where we just recently tried to share Christ. We did it well one time and didn't do it well another time. This past week, we went to see Libby Bowick, one of our church members, was in intensive care. And as we were going into the ICU area, an African-American family was coming out, and they were holding their loved one, and she was just wailing and gasping and such pain. And so I don't know what happened, but you know something bad's happened. I mean, she's not even walking in her own power. You can hear them in the waiting room. That family's just wailing and gasping and crying out loud. So we went and made our visit, and on the way out, I leaned over to Ted and said, Ted, I don't know what we're going to get into, but we're going to stop. We're going to help this family. I don't know what they need. I don't know if they want us, but we're going to stop. So we just went up to the first one we could reach and said, look, we're pastors, we're believers in Jesus. Could we just pray with you guys? Now, you don't know what they're going to say. Yes, no, get out of here. What do you mean pray? God did this. I mean, you don't know what of course, please. And so we just bowed with them, just prayed and blessed them. To me, it was easy to share the cross in that situation. The pain there was so deep, you can't mess that situation up. Well, what if I said the wrong thing? You can't say the wrong thing. What if you just came and hugged them and cried with them, you would move them along in the grieving process. Well, if you ever call here to the church and say, is Tom or Ted in? They go, no, they're at the West Ashley Chapel. You know what that means. We're at Starbucks, okay? The West Ashley Chapel is code word for Starbucks. So we're over at Starbucks. So we leave the hospital and we go to the West Ashley Chapel and we're having communion together. And we're having our coffee and we're sitting outside, and at the table next to us are 4 or 5 guys, all right? And they're kind of rough-looking guys. Well, you know, we're not a ray of sunshine, but they were rough-looking guys. But you know what? The fact is that if they're at Starbucks, we almost are family, okay? We know what it's like to mortgage your house to buy a cup of coffee. We share that together. And so we're sitting there and we're listening to what Ted calls random thoughts of spirituality. So this guy is tattooed from the wrist all the way up the neck, and he's saying, oh, let me show you the new one. I'm going, you got no more flesh. It was pretty and it was sharp, and I'm not knocking that. I'm just saying, I want you to get a picture. And so they're saying things that are spiritual. I'm listening to it, and I'm thinking, this is the cross out of my bulletin, but this is the cross I carry with me in my pocket to remind me to share it. And I'm thinking, I want to find a way to jump in. I'm scared. I'm a professional. So I'm just going ahead and saying, Lord, I don't know what to do. Pray for Ted. All right, Ted. I want Ted to get in there. Go get him, Ted, and I'll pray for you. I didn't handle that well, all right? What if they don't like me? You know what? If the movie theater was on fire and you said, look, hey, I hate to interrupt the movie, but the place is on fire. Get out. Nobody's going to turn around and look at you and go, oh, man, I was right in the middle. They're going to be glad you shared with them. It may be an immediate kind of a short-range uncomfortableness,